where do trade ideas come from? This is perfect. We're talking about Jermal's beautiful family, and he's wrestling with his kids, or to a point where he doesn't wrestle anymore. The obvious question that comes up at some point: where do children come from? Dad, where do babies come from?
Oh, wow.
We're not asking that necessarily today, Jermal. That would be weird if I put you on the spot for that. But what I will put you on the spot for is, where do the ideas for a trade come from? You have a great idea here today. We're going to dive into it, and we're going to end this week with your first futures trade here using the small exchange futures. A little background on where my trade ideas come from. I'm a big math guy. Usually for me, it's like, oh, that thing is, 2 standard deviations higher. That's a rare move. I'm going to get on the other side of it. Numbers. That's where I come from. But Jermal, I want you to talk about a little bit like high level where your ideas tend to come from. And then let's dive into how that process relates to current markets and what we're doing here today.
Well, it's funny. I just got an idea on top of the idea that we're talking about. And so
Beautiful.
Let's start with it on a simple level, and let's make it sports. You do a lot of fans. You're looking at a lot of the rabbit holes of music at night and Wikipedia. Plenty of times I'm looking at my 2 fantasy baseball teams at night, and I'm looking at different things, what's going on there. What do I need here? What do I need in this situation? And the teams are different. One of them's an old rotisserie team. One of them's a head-to-head team. And so I look at them in different ways. They're almost like 2 different portfolios. And I base it on, what's happening with that current team and what maybe I'm missing or lacking. So similar here, if in the standpoint of what's going on with markets currently, of course, that's part of the big idea. What's currently happening in the entire market? Then, of course, I pay attention to my own portfolio. How much stock do I have in these situations? How much stocks do I own? What's my option portfolio? And I do actually kind of break it out like that. Like I have a stock portfolio, I have an options portfolio, just because I like to look at them in different ways.
Sure.
And then what I'm eventually going to do now is have a futures portfolio. So it's all kind of the same thing. And this comes from the training from working at a prop trading firm. There's several ways to do it. I do like to have the ability to separate it out and say, hey, this is a stock portfolio, and this is what I'm doing here with these guys. This is the options portfolio. These are the type of trades that I have on here. And now this is going to be the futures portfolio. So that being said, we were talking about the idea of what would be the first futures trade. And I think I've said a couple of things before. We talked about it one time with sticks, but now I think I'm leaning towards doing this small US dollar futures trade. Why? Well, stocks are relative. I mean, of course, it's weird to say today, but still overall, people have to look at this from a long picture. Stocks are relatively elevated. They're relatively high from where they've been over the past year. We've seen the moves. We all know what's happened. And so just from that alone, people have to always remember, when you buy a stock, you're selling the dollar to buy a stock. And that was a weird concept that I didn't think about when I first started trading, that one of his senior traders helped me understand. But you're selling a dollar to buy stock. And so I do have this stock portfolio that I talked about already, right? And so I'm looking at the idea of what's happened with the dollar. And this is definitely, I would say a more complicated trade overall. I mean, it's not as simple as, Tesla's down, I want to buy Tesla because it's going to go up.
Sure.
Right? Like the idea of what's going on with the dollar is definitely complicated. It gets into monetary policy. It gets into what's going on with inflation, which of course is the hot word right now.
Yep.
I see it again, I might just pass out.
It's in 4 out of 5 tweets. That has no statistical basis, but it's in 4 out of 5 tweets.
It's probably accurate. I mean, because it's in probably 4 out of 5 tweets. I saw something the other day where they, because they measure, they pay attention. I can't remember what software they use, what's going on in conference calls and what they talk about. Inflation is a word that has popped up a ton. There is research that has shown that. So
anyway, I'm going to stop you right there, because you are down a beautiful path here. You started with something though that is really nice, which I think futures can really help in, which is you looked at your portfolio at large and you said, I've got stocks, I've got options trades and all this stuff on. What do I need given the current climate that stocks are higher and there is, this tendency in your mind, this tendency of, stocks move higher, dollar moves lower. And now that I have stocks that are at higher levels, you want to add a little bit of that dollar. Now, before you continue, I just want to give you, because this is all I'm here for. I'm just the numbers guy in this scenario. I crunched some numbers for you. You have the correlations here, which are stark negative, like you're talking about. You know, when you say every time you buy stocks, you sell dollars, it's the same for, Pete and I talk about this all the time. Every time you buy gold, most of the products you're trading, you're selling US dollars because you're buying it in US dollars. Same with these cryptocurrencies and everything else. You see the stark negative correlation here, and that is where that's what kind of propelled you into this idea. And I just wanted to give you a little bit of the research there to confirm it. And if you don't have the databases or the number crunching wherewithal to run correlations and stuff, pull up charts, man. Like it's a lot of stuff is random, but if you pull up like a year-to-date chart of the stock market and then type in right afterwards a year-to-date chart of the US dollar, like you're going to see that correlation in the fact that one is like this and one is like this. So a little bit of number crunching, but now I want you to dive back into, so we got the table set, you've got your portfolios. What did I need? Maybe this US dollar, maybe talk about why you think that is a good thing to add to this portfolio. And then, hit on some of that inflation piece before we go out here.
Yeah, I mean, you nailed it, man. Like the idea of the numbers and like you said, the chart. I mean, the chart kind of says it all. Look where the dollar was, of course, in March before we had everything happening. We had a lot of monetary policy. We had, the Fed doing what they did, which of course created the situation where we have stocks rising the way that they rose. You could easily put this on the chart and you could easily see, like you have laid out here, stocks have a negative 0.8 correlation. I mean, it's almost near one. So looking at that idea for a trade, this is why it's interesting because of, the divergence right now with stocks. We all know that cryptocurrencies have been on a serious move over the past, several months as well. So this is kind of a play on that. Now, the interesting part is it doesn't necessarily correlate with inflation, right? Like the idea of when inflation is not necessarily good for the dollar. So I am taking a gamble there. You're always taking a gamble in some way. But again, I would look at it as a hedge against my total portfolio with what I have. So that's why this idea of the SFX is interesting to me, because then I can buy this. This works against some of my other trades. And, I like it. And we've seen this recent move in precious metals and gold and silver, which is the other reason why I like it. So, I'm saying if I had to pick 3 out of 4 things, it's the stock, Bitcoin, and gold. These are the 3 out of 4 things that I would be buying this against.
Well, this is great because I've enjoyed thus far having you, in our small exchange universe and doing this stuff and learning how to trade futures. It's been a blast, but this is where it's going to really get fun. Is you bring something so new to the table. Like me, I look at this chart and I'm just like, I give you a historical basis for how low the US dollar is, what the odds are that it could climb higher and bounce off of these lows. And I crunch the correlations and stuff. But you just gave such a great idea there for 3 or 4 different reasons. Yes, it is low. That's obvious. You look at the chart. But for those long stockholders out there, you see the stark negative correlation here. If you're long stocks, a long US dollar trade here is a nice little hedge. And he is betting against some of this rhetoric that has driven the dollar lower, right? Which is like inflation, big worry, big worry, big worry. You're going against that. So it's a bunch of different reasons here to arrive at the long dollar trade idea that you have here. Now, the last thing is you have to make sure you have the right product. And I just pose this to you, $180. That's a nice little size there. That's something that I think most people are willing to cough up in terms of capital requirements. But more importantly, that's a good barometer of risk. And you're willing to say, $180 in risk. That's a comfortable price tag to get long SFX, right? Yeah,
it's a comfortable price tag. And I think the other thing too to pay attention to is that stock exposure. That's exactly how much, the amount of dollars worth is interesting, and I can pay attention to it as far as my hedge. And that wouldn't, that it wouldn't not fit in my portfolio. So that's nice too, because I think we talked about that on the earlier show, how much you can buy something, but sometimes it doesn't fit in your portfolio. This easily fits.
Well, and what's really nice about this is that currencies, and this is funny because we've talked about metals and technologies, stuff that moves around a lot. And I like that you came here for your first trade in futures because it is a slower piece. And with that slower piece, you go to UUP or FXE, these ETFs, to get your exposure. And you're paying a lot for something that doesn't move a lot here. You're getting $14,000 in exposure. So if you have, 10,000 or 20,000 or 30,000 invested in stocks, this is a nice hedge against that because you're getting 14,000 in exposure. You only have to pay about 1% to get that long because it doesn't move so much. So there's the efficiency of, you came with the idea why I would get US dollars. Why would you choose futures from the small exchange? Well, the price tag is really low. It's really efficient, and it's not taking up that much capital to get my hedge. So great segment here. Where do trade ideas come from? You got a great example from Jermal right there. Next up is going to be the trade entry checklist. We're looking at, if you want to follow my man around here, first trade is long SFX. You can look at it in your platforms and hopefully ride the wave higher with my buddy here on his first trade.